Hello, everybody. I just wanted to say these presentations were incredible. So maybe let's give a big round of applause to these high-tech gurus that we have on stage. Earlier today, we were talking a little bit about the trend lines and timelines in these emergent tech kind of phenomena. And now we have the chance to talk a little bit about the ripple effects that these new technologies might have on the culture at large, how we experience culture, and also what kinds of strategies might emergent creative technologists such as yourselves use to build the most satisfying, successful, and meaningful careers. So I'd love to start with you, Bryon, because in your incredible presentation, you were pointing out that one slide that has the individual who's kind of inscribed within that circle of circles, and one of them says mixed reality, one of them says apps, one of them says video games. I mean, you showed that to me in advance, and it kind of was an epiphany for me because it's like this new Vitruvian man. It's like that is our kind of like emerging field of reference. And, I wonder, you were talking about storytelling and the importance of storytelling. And there are all these new tools that are coming to play that have the potential to tell new kinds of stories. And I wonder what kind of emergent technologies are you most excited about in terms of new avenues of storytelling? And what are some of them that are still not baked enough to use yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when it comes to all the work that, I was kind of like sharing, like interactivity is the biggest part of it. So for me, anything that helps take a narrative and bring the participant deeper into the narrative are the spaces that I'm really excited about. And look, we've talked about AI, but I've seen some really amazing things done with AI just here. Last time I was here, I went to the Technology Entertainment Center with a few friends. They had like a very simple game built on GPT where I think it was trying to find out, there were 3 people at a table, which one's a which. So you're having a dialogue with the game, with NPCs, and they're trying to trick you. And I just think like when you think about experiences, you're gonna be able to bring people deeper into experiences and have more engagement, more personalization, more conversational kind of moments where you can kind of be pulled deeper into the story. And AI can power a lot of that. Disney had a huge immersive experience that was the Star Cruiser. It was a hotel that you would stay at for 2 days. There was an AI-driven a guide that would take you through. You got a personalized narrative, and your narrative would change and shift over time. So I just think those are the things for me where NPCs in games are going to start to have a really amazing interaction with you. Or when you go to real life experiences, somehow there's a tool or some level of interaction that can deepen your engagement in the story and bring you deeper into the world. I think that's the space that I'm really excited about, As far as the ones that aren't baked, I don't know, like, I think there's a lot of stuff that's not baked, but thankfully, I kind of showed some of the work we do in retail. Retail is iterative, it's fast, it's commercial, so you can try stuff. And no one's going to necessarily remember it, but you can kind of just do it, put it out in the world. 6 weeks later, everyone's forgotten, you got to focus on the next thing. So I would encourage all of you to be iterative, and if there's stuff that's half-baked, try it out. When you work with companies, you will find eventually you will get some pushback, like AR, for example. It can be challenging. Has been challenging for us at Nike to get people to engage deeply with their phones. If you're like trying to tell a story about a physical product in a store, it sounds great, but once someone gets up there with a phone, your drop off is pretty high. And so there is a lot of cases where we spend all this money and time trying to build something we think is going to be awesome. We learn from it, but the user engagement is kind of low, but that still to me is like, don't stop trying, keep pitching those ideas, keep trying the technology, keep trying to push the storytelling forward. And if it fails, find out in the field versus, trying to stop yourself too early. And again, I would recommend doing it on things that you can be iterative with and maybe, move beyond in 6 weeks or something like that, versus having it be a 3-year long thing that's half-baked.
I mean, I'm so curious when you talk about NPCs, because Nike is obviously this brand that is famous for its close association with the greatest athletes of all time. Yeah. And you have these immersive stores that you can go into and kind of like be in these sports worlds. Like, is there a pathway to going into a Nike store and being able to converse with, ex-athlete
LeBron,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have been discussing it. And I think what we've seen with like gaming, for example, if we don't get there first with an athlete, then the athletes will go there themselves. So, we will try to bring athletes into game experiences because they see that as an extension of their brand. It's a new way that their brand gets out there more deeply. And if Nike can get there, great, because it's a part of what we offer. We're helping them get to new platforms, and that furthers their brand. If we don't do it, they'll go and, there are many athletes who've gone. We work with Epic's Innovation Lab in LA. There are several athletes who've gone there, had their full scan done so that they have that data themselves. They can use it if they want to transfer it into a Fortnite skin or whatever, but they own that. So I would say, in that case, if we go to LeBron first and say, hey, we want to get a version of you that we can put in stores, there's a good chance that they will bite at that because it's an extension of their brand, that Nike's sponsored. They know it's going to be a certain level of quality. And it's a great customer experience that we can help control. And they still have, obviously a huge, voice in, right? And can help curate what it looks like. So we've been discussing things like that. And I think, we're looking at coaching for sports because we have sport apps, the running app. So how are we bringing some of those athlete voices into our apps to help people get coached, so it feels much more authentic. And I just think there's a huge amount that we're curious about. And some athletes are risk takers by nature, and they want to extend their brands. There's monetization involved in that. So the confluence of that, those two things together is driving some great innovation, I'd say, that's going to come out in years to come.
I mean, it's amazing to think that at the same time as this kind of like technology is changing, also sports is changing in a way. I mean, there's talk about like enhanced games. There's even talk about games in outer space.
Yeah.
Robo Olympics in Beijing. So when you're thinking about like the kind of the potential ways that the world that Nike operates in might be changing into the future, what kind of skill sets do you think are going to be especially useful from, new recruits or from the kinds of talents that you think are going to be really valuable?
On the games piece, I think I'm a little bit of an advocate for the opposite. I feel like in the future, given all the technology, human trials and tribulations and emotion of sport is actually going to be the thing that people care about more and need more versus technology in games. I think that is why sports is so important, because it's such a human thing. So I would just say, just on that note, I really think the future of sports is going to become even more important to all of us, because it is a human on human thing. There's just nothing like it. When it comes to, however, the technology that we're driving around storytelling and experiences and all the marketing and product development that we do, I just encourage everybody to be as multidisciplinary as possible. Try as many things as you can. I have, within brand experience, we have architects, we have fine artists, graphic designers, and that's a beautiful palette, for someone like myself to be able to tap into and pull into different experiences. Like Sundar talked about, just all the the collaborativeness that happens in experience development. And I agree, production and operations are creative functions, and sometimes they're not looked at that, but they are 1,000% one-to-one equal to a designer. So whatever it is, I just encourage people, follow the pursuit that you're passionate about, the design thing that you're excited about. You don't know where that's going to lead. It could lead you into a production and operations role, but that is equally as important. So I don't have any specific advice other than definitely stay close to your passion and chase after, give yourself projects that are self-initiated. When you interview with us, we like to see process. Sometimes the thing that you just were kind of tinkering around with is actually the interesting thing versus your school projects. So when you're just kind of geeking out, making some weird thing, sometimes that's the thing that I'm more attracted to, versus there was a story of an architect that got hired at Nike. And, he had all these great commercial projects, but the thing everyone loved was this chicken shack that he had designed. It was a hole in a wall that you would just come out with your bag of chicken. It was like, it had some weird idea, but it was just some weird thing he did. Everyone was like, yeah, that's the guy who we want design in our stores because he's got that weird thing. And sometimes you're looking for that weird thing versus just very structured linear thinking. So don't be afraid to show you're weird when you go into your interviews, because that stuff might be the differentiator, you know?
So Mike, in your presentation, you kind of gave us a glimpse of how you've been living in the future for a very long time. And when you were talking about creating the metaverse with your buddies back, I think 30 years ago.
That was a really bad idea. No, it was fun, but it literally was 30 years too early.
It's unbelievable to think that, the AR, VR, mixed reality has been something that has been, this slow train coming for a long time. And we were talking.
I like to say 3D is a sine wave, right? It's like up and down, up and down, up and down. Yeah.
But I wonder, I know that you are skeptical, even though it seems like we're at the on the cusp of maybe having this breakthrough moment for AR wearables, that you're skeptical about the wearable component of it, and that you think there are better form factors, better means of engagement with this technology. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So first of all, you won't find a bigger fan of VR, AR, mixed reality, 3D. I'm the biggest. I buy everything. I'm like huge. I've always been into it. The problem is that people just don't want to wear these bulky things on their faces. Like, they just don't. Gamers will do it for a little while. If you're a specialist, you will do it because it's part of your job. We saw an amazing thing yesterday, right, of integrating a VR headset into a welder's mask, which is quite a funny story in and of itself. But that was very appropriate, right? Like, that was a great thing to do. But in general, VR is never going to go mainstream, period. You can quote me on this. Never, never, never going to go mainstream. We will have different technologies that take its place. Now, VR is incredibly powerful for what it gives you the ability to do, which is be transported and immersed and see things in a whole new way. You can't even come close to it. But it's such a niche thing right now. What will happen is, in society, you will start to see screens that can actually break the plane. There's a company called Leia, like Princess Leia, Leia Incorporated. They make tablets and phones and monitors that actually project 3D without you having to wear anything on your face. No glasses, no headset, no nothing. Super convincing, just like going to an IMAX 3D movie without having to put glasses on. That is, to me, very accessible. If any of you have ever been to Times Square in New York, there are these gigantic billboards where it looks like the 3D sort of comes out of the billboard. You've probably seen videos of this too. You don't have to wear anything on your face to see that. And it's super compelling. So yes, I am not down with this whole, like, let's get new products and put them on our faces. Now, I do believe glasses may have a chance, right? So we heard earlier today there's going to be some amazing new things that happen. But are all of you going to start wearing glasses just because you can see overlays and hear music? Okay, you too? God bless you, as we say in the old country. No, but it's true that, like, some people will, like, that's an acceptable thing, and you'll try it out. A lot of people spend their entire lives trying to not wear glasses. Okay, so you have to think about, like, the human part of this whole thing. Anyway, so it's going to happen, but it's going to happen in very different ways. It'll be projection technology. It'll be screens that break the plane. It'll be being able to actually not even need that, because the environment will give you different means for seeing all that through projection.
So, I mean, Leia, I guess, is probably named after Princess Leia because of those famous scenes in Star Wars where you see the hologram emerging of her. And you wrote the book on holograms called Envisioning Holograms. When holograms?
Yeah, that was in 2017 when the Microsoft HoloLens first came out, which was the first really, like, sort of a high-end mixed reality device. It was I said it looked like ski goggles, like visor that you put on, and you could see these digital things in the world. I wrote that as a textbook, really, or an explanation of how to approach dimensional design for people who had no background in that. And so I tried to keep it really simple. It wasn't about you have to learn this, or it was more about you have to think about this, you have to think about that. So it was a lot of fun to do that.
But when do you think they're going to be like?
I mean, so holograms exist now.
Right.
Some of them are in your mixed reality headsets, some are in your AR glasses, some are in your VR headsets. I mean, holograms to me and the way they were defined originally, were just dimensional objects, digital things that lived in the environment that you were in. And they could be anything. They could be information. They could be data. They could be, a cat. It didn't really matter.
So I love in the context of all of these kind of slower trajectories that are coming of age, one at a time, over time. Your principle of fast design, and that was very provocative and very interesting. And I'm sure it kind of shook some people up.
Yeah, sorry, I probably will never see you here again because they won't let me back in the building.
But I'd love to know what is the virtue of moving fast?
Because everybody needs you to move fast. It's sorry, I have breaking news. You do not have a bunch of time to do your projects. You don't get to be precious with your design. You have to figure it out and move on to the next thing, because there are a lot of next things. Sorry.
So Sundar, no, I mean, your presentation was fascinating because it touches on a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is the potential for unlocking the art experience using these new kinds of techniques. And I think I love art. I've spent most of my life kind of trying to understand it, trying to explain it to people. And I know that when I go into a museum, when I'm traveling, I go look at an artwork, and I will probably not understand a thing about it. Maybe I'll have certain kind of cues, I can roughly place it in some kind of tradition. Maybe I can know who the artist is, but to understand what the actual content of that artwork is something that I find difficult, and that I think for most people is impossible. So when you go to a show, a lot of the things that you get out of it are almost like these mirror reflections of what you already knew before you went into the show, maybe with some kind of concomitant learning about, some new insight, but you don't really get that content. So if you think about these new tools that are at your disposal, as somebody who is really an expert in designing these interfaces in museums, first of all, what do you think is the problem to solve in that context, and what are some newly available strategies for doing it?
Yeah, that's great. Actually, before I answer your question, thank you, Bryon. That was honestly I'm going to keep thinking about that for a while. So I want to think through how the Pompidou Nike thing happened. So I'm sure I'm going to call you and be like, okay, how do we make this happen again in other contexts? And I do agree with Mike on the moving fast, but I also disagree, and we'll come back to that in a second. And it actually ties into the question that you're asking. The example that you use is exactly correct. You go to an art gallery and it's hard to understand it sometimes, and we're actually working on a product for exactly this. But how many of you know what a dosa is? Wow, damn, that is, I'm shocked. Okay, how many of you know what sambar is? Okay, how many of you have a preference of sambar? Okay, so here's an issue, right? Where I come from, this sambar and dosa are kind of a religious thing. People will go to places like hot dogs, you go to the right place for the right sambar. And the condiment is almost more important than the main thing in some cases. And there's a conversation that happens around that. And this is true of a lot of different foods around the world. In order to get that experience, it's not about the thing in front of you. There's a narrative around it that we build, which is mythology, which is really what we kind of tie into something, A pizza, I'm sure that everyone has an opinion on pizza. There's only one opinion on pizza. It's a New York opinion on pizza, And I think that and even in New York, there's only the slice opinion. Sorry, you cannot have a full pizza opinion. It is not a thing, And so that is a mythology that gets created, and that mythology is about how that story is told to you. And the reason
do you mean the no ketchup on a hot dog story?
Yeah, sort of like that, exactly, And the thing is that when you go through this experience, if you have that story that guides you, it's much more fun to have the experience. And in a way, this is like the art thing. So I was at the Hermitage in St. Petersburg not that long ago, and it is there's a painting there. This is just the black square. Are you guys familiar with the black square? It is literally a black square. It's a black painting, and a lot of people go, "What the hell?" It's like a Rorschach test, or like I forget the other artist who does. Anyway, it's just Rothko. Like it's sort of like a Rothko. Thank you.
Malevich, I believe you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a Malevich, but it's like you go in and you see this, and you're like, it's sublime, but you cannot understand it until you're there, and then somebody talks about it, and then you see his process, and you're like, it's all the stuff that is not on that label on the wall, So I think this is the opportunity that we have to like think through how can these tools be used in these spaces, and this is hard to do. And I'll take one other thing, which is the idea of what AI is often. Like, for example, if we're trying to explain something or go through a process, this is not really AI. A lot of this is just a database and a mechanism of getting data from the database into a user interface, okay? AI has somehow become like a catch-all for absolutely everything out there that a machine can do. And there are much simpler ways to execute some of those experiences. But what is cool right now is that the vast diversity of tools is so much easier to use than it has ever been. And so executing on those kinds of experiences is the kind of fun thing. So it's almost like my design process has generally been start with the end. What is the end user's experience going to be? There's a bunch of different ways that you can get there, but if you don't know what that experience is supposed to be like, so there's, for example, when the Palm Pilot was made, one of the design processes in it was Jeff, whose last name I forget now. Do you remember Jeff's last name? Yeah. Anyway, he cut a piece of wood, and he had to figure out what the size of this thing had to be. And it had to fit in his pocket. And he went through a lot of different iterations of just this piece of wood in his pocket, okay? Amazon has the design process, which is start with the PR first, or like, Jen talked yesterday about like setting up the booth in the mall for the pharmaceutical experience. These kinds of things are really important because now to get to that final product is super fast, right? You can make a website in minutes. It used to take weeks, or months. You can do a proof of concept super, super quickly. This is where I agree with Mike on the getting things done fast. But if you don't do it right, you're just creating garbage. Anyone can do stuff fast, honestly, and it will just produce trash, and we can always create more trash. But to do something well, to have an engineered process after you do that thing fast is a very important thing because craft is part of what we do. This is why you guys do what you do.
They're designers. They're gonna do a great job. They're just gonna do it faster.
You can also produce trash. I still produce trash, as you saw. Fonts that don't work. And I spent a lot of time on that presentation. So.
Well, you had this this great concept, and I mean, in your presentation, you laid out all these different structures and hierarchies of roles and these cosmologies of all the people that need to take part in making an experience in a museum. But there was one term that you told me when we were talking earlier that was not in there, and that is solutions architect. And I think that is a really interesting concept that you have for this needed kind of missing a link in the process of bringing these kinds of immersive or otherwise like interpretive like new experiences to museums that match up with what the curators want to do. But there's the missing piece. So how would you describe that?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I actually have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with a lot of the terminology that we use. Like the word, my partner and I go through this process of banned words, and one of the banned words is experience, You like try to explain what we do without using the word experience or interactive or immersive or interesting or, these are garbage words in my opinion. These are like, they don't tell you anything at all about what the thing is that we do. Because we have vocabulary. So let's actually use that, like, is it a sentiment, is it a sentimental, engagement, something like this. And I suffer with this all the time. And one of my problems is, like, in order to convey an idea, there's this term solutions architect. I generally have shied away from this term because it's a term used by a lot of consultants out there, and they will come in as solutions architect. I'm going to be very controversial here and say, like, if you ever see solutions architect on a deck, normally it's written by an idiot. But sorry. I now realize that I am starting to do this, so, whatever. It's reflective on some way.
I thought this was your term.
I know, exactly. But the idea of a solutions architect is, essentially we're trying to build solutions in spaces, and spaces are complicated, and trying to tell a story is a very complicated process of, like, bringing a lot of things together. We're trying to solve problems. This is why we are building solutions. But solutions themselves don't just get there. Like, you can be a solutions engineer. The term architect sounds sexy, which is why we use this term, solutions architect. Being an architect is by no means sexy, as I'm sure many of you who have been in the architecture background can attest. It's a lot of work. And generally people do that for a little while and then they become something else. But somehow they still keep the term architect because it sounds sexy, it's like, but yeah, like how to find terminology that describes the thing that we do when these terms don't exist yet because the craft is new is interesting. That's why I even put up this idea of notation. So for example, like the stuff that we do, if you have to explain it to somebody and repeat what we do, the process is unrepeatable because you can go, my subjective process was this, but this is not a scientific way of doing things, because we're working with sentiment, and sentiment is largely scientific, even though you might think it's subjective. Like anyone who watches food TV and has watched people like Alton Brown knows this thing. Like there's a science to food. You know how to trigger things. So I think spaces, these kinds of experiences, once you understand the science, you can take it to so much farther instead of just like, trial and erroring the process of trying to get there. And that's what a solutions process really should be about.
Well, I think now we can open things up to the audience questions. And I have this amazing technological marvel in my hand over here. So let me see. Maybe, I think here's a great question for Mike. And there are actually two of these questions in different wordings, so I think that's always a good sign. But the question is regarding your beautiful and totally artistic data visualizations. It's how do you balance these dynamic and cinematic data visualizations with clarity and understanding in practice? Or the other version of it is how do you have them be fixed enough to really focus on them?
It's a great question. So I wrote this book called Visualizing Business that actually explains all the different techniques and the approach and why. But to paraphrase, we have spent 30 years looking at static charts and graphs. We've become very good at understanding what they mean, but there's always more to it. You always have to figure out what the chart or the graph is trying to tell you. I think that's ridiculous because we were storytellers, right? We've heard about this for 2 days now. We have the ability for information or data or whatever you want to call it to tell its own story, right? To be able to give you the high points, to be able to show you. But in some cases, it has to move, right? And so to me, I talk about 4D, right? So to me, the fourth element is time, right? So being able to see data over time is really important. And so I just think that we're at a point now where all the technology exists. Certainly we have the talent, we have the storytelling ability, so we can bring our information to life in new ways so you don't have to figure it out every time. And so to me, that's the important part, is that I want to be able to have information tell you its stories, so you don't have to figure it out. But the second part is about clarity. We often put a whole bunch of stuff on the screen or on a piece of paper or on a wall, and you have to sort through it in your mind and figure out what it's trying to tell you, when we could have just given you the insight. Because we know what the insight is. As designers of that information, we know what we want you to know, but somehow we think we have to be objective. And, oh, we can't, like researchers love saying this, we have to be objective. We can't tell you, you have to figure it out. I'm like, what are we paying you for? We're paying you to tell us what this means. So you can't be shy about being clear. And to me, being clear means surfacing the insight, the thing that is most important. And so I'll just say this as me. I believe that designers will lie, cheat, and steal to get their point across. You should think about that next time you have to present some information.
One thing I'll add to that is there's a very cool TED Talk about exactly this topic from 2011, 2000, the Hans Rosling one, 2007?
It's a while ago.
It's a while. It's like a really old video. And Hans Rosling is a data scientist. Like he kind of triggered us all in many ways, I think. And it's worth watching if you can. He does exactly this. His team got acquired by Google or something and got then the whole mechanism of making animated time series graphs got put into Google Sheets. So the tools are so accessible now. It's kind of crazy. But it's very fun to play around with, like how the time aspect works there.
It's fascinating to think that as a former data journalist, you're trying to show your work, but in a way to kind of nudge the reader into accepting your formulation, because data, as everybody knows, is not objective.
No.
So I love the idea of kind of cutting the chase.
Yeah.
So, Bryon, here's a question for you, which has been upvoted 4 times, which is very important.
Smash that like button.
And then there's one above this that's upvoted 5 times. We'll get to that one next. But how long did it take you to become a creative director? And what advice do you have for someone interested in leading creative direction?
Could you repeat leading creative?
Leading creative direction.
Leading creative. Man, well, creative director. I mean, I got the title first in 2017. I became a VP like less than a year ago. But it's something that it's just a title, right? And I think I still consider myself a designer. So whoever is curious about creative direction, I think, what I would really recommend is stay close to your skills, but broaden them. It's kind of what I was talking about around being multidisciplinary. I think a creative director's role is to edit, curate, and that's with work and talent. So sometimes you're in the actual work, which means you're working across content, media, something that's interactive, a space. And so you need to pull together all the people that can do that work well. And so you're not only like directing their abilities, knowing their strengths, but also the work itself. And so because of that, I just think you have to understand the work. And probably like why I think a part of like the success that I had or have had is because, like I said, I started in a wood shop. So I built boxes. Then I had to go design boxes. Then I had to design bigger boxes. Then I had somebody designing those boxes. And so that kind of step by step, from being so hands-on to then being able to guide people to become great box makers has been just a really long process, but it's again, the number one thing is just staying close to the work, because I do think there are creative directors who get a title, lean back, and I'm sorry to say, but their work sucks. It's a title, and I honestly never wanted it. I used to look down on the title creative director. But at Nike, I think it genuinely is one of the places where it means something. It was like a very rare thing there. And you have to come up through a lot of, other teams. And the reality, what I've learned with the success that I've had at Nike, at least becoming a creative director at Nike, it's a team sport. So if you're great at that, kind of team effort, all boats rise. And if you're really good at helping get the best out of everybody else, and having a successful project where you're growing people and you're growing the team and you're doing something for the business, that's where you start to kind of stand out. But you have to kind of hit all those things, So yeah, that's probably the best I can answer that.
I think a lot about the difference between artists, creatives, and creators these days, because it seems that there have always been very hard and fast divisions between these, where the artist is the person who makes art for art's sake, and that goes in the museum, and like the gallery sells it, and the creative makes art on behalf of a brand potentially, or on behalf of a partner.
For sure.
And maybe a creator is somebody who makes stuff, builds an audience, and then leverages that audience in whatever way they want, be it art or be it creative. And it seems to me that like with all these new tools and all these new mediums and all these new platforms,
Everybody's a creative director.
yeah, or that like it's all becoming the same thing. That like having like those distinctions means that you're not really in touch with the creativity or the culture of your time. If you're saying that an artist gets to go in the museum, but the creative doesn't get to go to the museum because the creative is working with the brands.
I just think, like we create those divisions, and those kind of lines and definitions and things like that. It's like ultimately like there's just a pool. We're all in this pool of different types of creativity. And some people, like I've heard once someone say like art is a question, design's the answer. Artists are asking big questions and, they don't care what you think about the answer necessarily, but they're doing it for their own sake. And designers are trying to solve problems, but that doesn't mean we can't all hang and work together and appreciate, get something out of that and steal it and pull it over here. It's just this constant, gathering and amazing, like to me, collaboration and that creative pool of all these people have access to tools that are amazing and being able to create more from it. There is a lot of crap, but the good stuff does sift to the top, and the good people, I would say, as a part of that, you can learn a lot from. And naturally, those people start to come together, so, yeah.
And then you throw the technologists in there, and then you have a party.
Totally.
And
we can make some weird drone show and like be raving and, doing all kinds of stuff.
Work with you?
Yeah, man.
So Sundar, this one is for you. What does the convergent thinking process that you curate look like when it comes to taking that really far-fetched and abstract idea and making it into reality? I can say that again.
No. I got the question. It's just, what does the answer to that look like? I think everything is just steps. Getting to Pittsburgh took some number of steps. And there's a system that got me here, And I think, like, when I started this process, like, I went through an engineering process, and at the time, this is how dated I am. Network cards were not common. You could not connect computers to each other using normal networks, which is kind of like Wi-Fi didn't exist yet, And my thesis project was to make this thing that I didn't know how to do, and I failed at it so miserably because I was not given the steps, And this is one of the things that I am realizing, that anyone can do anything. And my friend here, we were talking about like playing the trumpet. How many of you play a musical instrument? How many of you enjoyed it right away? Yeah, that thing. So about 5 years ago or so, I bought a trumpet during COVID, and I decided to learn how to play the trumpet. How many of you know how to play the trumpet? It's a stupid instrument. It's so hard to like just get noise out of it, But what I realized after setting a certain amount of time for myself to do this is I can play, and it's like I am shocked that I can play, because it's like it's the same thing as I also decided to learn Arabic during COVID, and I was like, I can read and write. Like, to me, it's like that scene from The Matrix. How many of you have watched The Matrix? Okay, most of you have watched The Matrix. That thing where Keanu Reeves goes, I know Kung Fu. This is what it feels like. It's like, wow. And all it is practice. That is it. The process is so important. And everyone has told me through my entire life, practice practice makes perfect, and practice is important. But they never explained what that was. So this is what I will tell you. You crawl before you can run. This is everyone knows this. Everyone feels like an idiot. Imposter syndrome doesn't ever go away. Okay, these are the things that are givens, like paying taxes. But the process becomes part of who you are after a while, and you start having pride in being able to do it. This is the coolest thing about it. Not that you will become proficient and you will be amazing. Some of you will become amazing. Some of you will not become amazing. But it is okay. Like, it's still, like, I struggle with this every single day. But when I went to do the Museum of the Future, sorry, I realize it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I went in 2019 to do the Museum of the Future. Initially, when I got the call, I was like, no way I'm moving to Dubai. And then I went and I saw this building, and I went inside the building, and I was like, I don't understand if this thing can be done. Like, physically, engineering-wise, I was like, this round thing is very, very difficult to pull off. And it had to be done in 13 months at the time. I got there in July, and it had to be open by December 2020. In July of 2019, it had to be open by December 2020, which means everything had to be completed by October of 2020. I was like, this project will probably kill me. Bryon, this is our stupidity. I don't know what it is about like what we do. But then you go, oh, when you're done, you laugh about it and you go, oh, let me do the next thing like that. You're like, what? This is not the way we should operate. But anyway, so I did it, and I had to think through what are the steps that I have to follow in order to get there. It was me. I had to figure out how to make the team, a team like that had never made a museum before, because I was not allowed to hire internationally. I had to hire local people. Figure out how to get people on track to make this thing, teach them a craft that they had never had, all while everything else is going on. Bureaucracy, headaches, project planning, writing code, all of this other stuff. All you do is you take the steps. You do the journey map, and you do the journey, and the journey map will be wrong. 100% it will be wrong. There's a guarantee it will be wrong. You do it anyway. And then you make it again, and you make it again, and you make it again. And the cool thing is we have Post-it notes. Post-it notes are the greatest invention of all mankind, right? Yes? For every designer. This is the greatest thing ever, because you can just put up a Post-it note that says start, and you put a Post-it note that says end. And somewhere in between, a bunch of stuff has to happen, and you can keep moving them around. This is the trick. That's it. That's all you have to do. And you keep doing this over and over again. And that practice sounds super dumb, but let me tell you, this is super effective. You just do this every day, even if you go through the process of what did I do today? I got out of bed, at the end of the day, I did this. What happened in between? You just do this over and over again, and this process is so effective, I don't even know how to describe it. It's crazy.
I mean, that's a great segue to this audience question that I think also ties in with fast design. So Mike, I'm going to direct this one to you.
Wait, but nobody likes my idea.
No, I don't think that's at all the case. That's not at all the case. I think it's just it's provocative, which is really beneficial.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Like, so here's, I think, a really interesting question in that context, which is, how do you figure out whether you've finally gotten it right?
Oh, this is the best part of all.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. All right, I love this part. Okay. You will never know that you got it right. But you did your best in the amount of time that you had allocated, and you finished it, and you went on to the next thing. That's being right, in my book. You can try to be perfect. You will never be perfect. You can try to be excellent. You might be excellent, but you can be done. And I'm not saying you should do crap. Like, that's not what I'm advocating. You are very talented. That's why you're sitting here, right? You're sitting here for a reason, because you're very good at what you do. Use the skills you have, use your talent, use your instinct. But to me, that's kind of the thing, right? This is not a data thing. This is not a right or wrong thing. You kind of have to use gut instinct on this one. You will know when it's right. And then you're going to test it, and you're going to find out that it was totally wrong. Okay, but that's okay, because then you go fix it. But you can't just keep working and being afraid to show it to somebody. You have to get feedback early, right? You just have to. That's how we do things, right?
Well, so I'm sure you've told this story a billion times, but I mean, in the context of this question, can you briefly talk about the creation of the PDF and how you did that? Was that part of this kind of approach?
Yeah. So I'll just really quickly, I'll tell you this. And I always say this. So I was literally the very first person to hack together a file format that became portable document format, PDF. It was just another day in the office, right? We were trying to solve a problem. It was a big problem that existed in the world. You couldn't move a file from the Mac to a PC to a Unix machine because it just didn't look right. And so the guy I worked for at Adobe, named John Warnock, who's a founder, was a technologist, brilliant guy, had an idea of how to fix it. He said, I think it's kind of like this. Go figure that out. And we just literally hacked things together. And so when I say hack, I don't mean like nefarious hacking. I mean just putting something together very quickly to see if maybe it could work. And it worked. And so, we went out and we tested it. Now, the most horrible part of all is that this was done in the very early days of, still, it was kind of the early days of the Macintosh and operating systems. A lot of the stuff that I invented during that period of time in the user interface is still in the Acrobat user interface, to my horror. Okay, because I knew it was wrong, but like I literally wanted Acrobat to look like a piece of paper with no interface on it whatsoever. Adobe went a little overboard on this one, and they keep making it worse and worse. Okay, like it really, like honestly, so it's horrifying to me as the original designer. But you can never tell that you're exactly right, but you will know when you get feedback if you did it well enough that people can do whatever it was that you intended, whether that's a piece of art or a great product or a piece of whatever that you might design.
So it worked.
It worked.
So that's a
Working,
good kind of...
Yeah, working is a win, by the way. Guess what? We're getting thrown out.
Oh, one more question. Okay, so let me see. And I'm going to address this to Bryon. So who do you prefer working with and why? The jack of all trades or the specialist? Which goes further, and how do they impact the dynamic on your team?
That's a really tough question because I don't want to cut either out or cause someone to think that's a better track, because I think you need both. I tend to, I would say, the work that we do, the work that I do specifically is broad. So there are a lot more high-level skills that can stretch across more things, because we have a smaller team. If you have a bigger team that has hundreds of designers or tens of 20, 30, 40, 50 designers, you can get into specialties. But with a nimble team, I'll start with more generalists, and when we get more into specialty things, then we go deeper and hire somebody that's much more specialized. There's not a preference. I love meeting people that are geek out on just the one thing. That's their thing, and they are insane at it. And I'm just like, you're a god at this, and I need you so bad right now. But the generalists who can dance across multiple formats and just with ease, that just blows my mind. So I really, I have a few people that come to mind on my team that are just, I'm in awe in how they can operate across multiple formats, from a sketch to a 3D environment to then, installing something on site. So again, my thing is multidisciplinary, I think, is the healthiest space. Try to learn as much as you can across as many different mediums as possible. You will be able to, and if there's something that really gets sticky, you can go into that, but I would say start as broad as possible. And once you start to feel, hey, over here, I'm kind of really digging on what this, what my relationship with graphic design is, or, gaming or interactive worlds, start to hedge your bets a little bit towards that, but don't lose sight of the other stuff, Tough one. That's a really tough question. Good question.
It's a great answer. I keep on thinking of Ocean's 11, and you're trying to pick all these specialists who are. But thank you very much. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
A lot of fun.
Oh.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.